Welcome to Ramsey Podcast. As we enter March, as actually we're near the end of March when this will be coming out. We're talking about the first steps in maybe improving one's situation, improving someone's life. We had many guests who spoke. And I'm here to kind of just wrap things up. I remember this quote from Rosa Parks that I've been mentioning in each of the last three um, podcasts, and it was I've learned over the years that when one's mind is made up, this diminishes fear. Today, I will be as I said, wrapping up this discussion and taking the first step. Again, disclaimer: if you are in crisis, please seek appropriate professional help immediately. The new 988 Suicide Crisis Lifeline is available for those in the United States, that is. But if you are around, wherever you are around the world, whatever community you belong to, whether it's your church community, whether it's a social connections with your friends, family, the most important thing is to remember to ask for help. As adults, it gets harder to ask that, and as we have been diving through this and many other topics in Revive Ministries, the most important thing is to know that you need help, and if you do need help, it's okay. I want to start off with the quote that I've been using for a lot of my guests. It's from Karl Barth. He says, "Though no one can go back and make a brand new start, anyone can start from now and make a brand new ending." Listen to some of the responses I've heard from some of my guests. This quote reminds me of just the idea, the process that change and getting there can be. It's one thing to notice that something is an issue, but sometimes the uncertainty of what's next can draw us back to something that may be less positive. However, the uncertainties maybe seem heavy, and as we look at this quote, it may not mean much. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves of the little things we do each day and not the big ones that we want to strive for. Karl Barth's quote reminds me that this is a process that will continue little by little, and it starts when, at least my own experience and what I've seen, it starts with the little things: waking up, connecting with those around you, not assuming, not avoiding. And a lot of times it takes time and insight, and sometimes that insight takes us to have those moments to look at ourselves, and sometimes that is some of the scariest things we can actually do. And it also can be one of the most humbling experiences. One of the questions I didn't ask everyone, but I put it here, and I'm going to try to attempt to answer it. What has made you stay resilient in your life during hard times, and what would you say to those who want to give up today? Well, that's a loaded question, but thinking about it, I always kind of check my surroundings, look at what I have around me. A good day is, my mom used to say, if you're, a lot of times when we have bad days, we can't really do everything we like, but the days that we're doing okay, those are the days where you can kind of take account. So when I was younger, and maybe even so now, maybe I'm not very keen to clean like stuff around. So my mom would say, when you're feeling well, just pick one part, whether it's part of the room, just do the room. Don't do anything else, just do the room. Bathroom, do sink, whatever it may be. And in our lives, when you think about resilience, you don't wait till the time when it rains, when it pours, when things are. You start now. So that means I start thinking about, okay, who do I have my who are my protective, what does my protective factors look like? Well, I have family, I have my wife, I have colleagues, I have some people in church that I feel connected to. Okay, those are people. What other protective factors do I have? Well, I know I've practiced mindfulness for myself for many years. I know progressive relaxation. Okay. Um, and then, the list continues. Like maybe think about certain things that may be helpful. Going out for a walk, but what if it's raining and you're stuck? And what if you're sick? What if you're not able to go anywhere? What do I do then? What if there's no power? What if I'm not able to engage in certain avenues that I'm used to doing to de-escalate? Well, those are the more, I say, that's when you have to be a little bit creative, uh, and understand that this is just an exercise to kind of be aware of what your protective factors are. A lot of times in the field, protective factors are elements in your life that can help support some of the times that are not so savory. So it can add to the ability to be resilient. What would I say to those who want to give up today? Well, like I said in the very beginning, disclaimer, ask for help. Find that, even if a lot of times environment is not always ideal, but find the person that you feel you can ask, hey, I'm not doing so well. If we're really being honest, sometimes when we measure it to a cold or whatever physically, we may be like more willing. But when it comes to something mental, you're having strain or something that's not completely visible, we may say, well, I'll just deal with it. Well, I encourage you to, especially if it's overwhelming or it's something that's impeding other elements of your life, and to ask for help. And I know it's easy to say those words, and so just like the illustration, find those little steps to get there. Now, if it's an emergency, again, I do encourage you to find help, professional help immediately. But if it's something that you feel is growing, the best thing I would recommend, obviously, is to stay ahead of it. Don't assume that things will work itself out organically. Alice Walker says the most common way people give up their powers by thinking they don't have any. A lot of times, that idea is very, I say, inspiring, but at the same time, I would like to just kind of, when I look at this, after speaking to some of my guests, I kind of see it a little bit differently. If you notice that if you're not able to know that you have um, an ability to see past giving up, or you feel that you don't have any, um, sometimes it's not as simple as willing yourself out of it. So in certain cases, you may need to get some help. You may need to get some support, some professional help to work from that element of state you're in. And it could be something that you're dealing with. It could be something traumatic, something that makes you fear what's ahead of you. It makes you fear that there is no other choice. And the only thing that you can think about is to give up. Now, giving up in itself, if it's just giving up in the essence of an activity or pursuit, is one thing, even though even that should not be minimized. But unfortunately, when I hear the most common way people give up their power, giving up could be many other things. And some of those things you can't come back from. Moving to this next part, it says, what have you seen or has helped you stay intentional in continuing to taking step forward? Well, it's taking some time out of each day or out of each week, whatever is the best context to your time that you have, and taking account of what you have, how you've been feeling. If you feel sad, don't discount it. Even if you notice that sad or anger that you felt was not really in relation to what is in reality, it still needs to be addressed, especially in the context that it will not go away. It may be something else. And it's just if you notice a pain in your ankle or your leg, even though it may not be what initially you thought it was, it does need, it may be wise to find out what it is. And if you're unable to, it may be wise to get some further assistance to address it. Um, I always like these quote. I put it a lot of times on my website or just mention it. Nelson Mandela. Now your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. Obviously, people are in different stages, so this may be unachievable yet. I like to put yet at the end of a lot of these statements because we are kind of in this whatever state we're in. And maybe this idea of choice reflecting hope and not fears makes it so far off to that individual. Um, and a lot of times it's recognizing when it's not just a thought that I'm struggling to get past, and where it's something that is a real struggle that's being a barrier for me to move forward. I mentioned in one of my podcasts the difference between how it feels to just maintain from negative motivation. The idea is that if I don't do this, I will end up in jail. Or if I don't do this, I will end up, I say, on the street, not doing well. Those things are okay, temporary, but a lot of times the idea is to transition to something more. The idea is that you're not pushed, you're kind of pulled to some sort of next step. And the Italian proverb says, if you can't live longer, live deeper. I can kind of hear that said in Italian. Just the idea is, on the surface, we may feel safe. But from my experience, I feel adding the element of curiosity to what is going on with you, I have found to be a great habit that I've seen at least being helpful. Indication that I'm maybe stagnant or maybe not being as intentional is not being curious. I don't really trust my perspective. I understand emotions for what they are. I do not feel that they're, at the same time, even though they're not correct, it's there for whatever. Like, the accuracy of my emotions does not dictate its importance. I'm still going to feel what I feel, and a lot of us are led by our perception. So I don't measure it on the same measuring stick as I would looking at my life and as a rational on the outside, as exterior kind of account of what's going on. Emotional is very important too. Motivation, is something that is cultivated by some of these micro. Obviously, in some cases, there's a depletion of dopamine. We mentioned this in previous episode in the biological component to it, but the transition, speaking since I'm not of that field, but speaking of the idea of finding and meaning and purpose towards not just a negative outcome, but towards a positive one, is where, obviously, when I'm thinking about this subject of implementing a helpful, intentional way to take step forward. Because at the end of the day, if it's all about not using, if it's all about not going back to a more of a negative experience, At least from my experience, it hasn't been enough to stay intentional. What has been the biggest lesson that I've learned or learning to this time is that this stuff will take time. Sometimes I feel like I'm doing really well, connecting certain avenues, but when it comes to our whole self, there's certain blind spots, certain areas that I may not actually see very well. Um, Another thing is, I'm just one person, so we may try to chew more than we can actually chew. In essence, I learned that I may not be able to do everything, and it's sometimes healthier to walk away. Also learned, especially one of the biggest lessons I learned when it comes to starting over is it will be an unpopular idea at first. Um, Unfortunately, in some cases, if you've been chronically ill or if you have mental illness for several years and the family, you may be doing well. But when it comes to asking the question, what does taking the first step mean? It feels unimportant. These are some things that I've seen stagnate in in progress. I could say that at least for myself. Not sure exactly the context, and that I feel that in itself kind of speaks volumes. I mentioned in the previous podcast that one of the hardest lessons I learned was just the amount of energy I took to try to have people understand what I'm going through, especially in the beginning, how terrifying it felt being ill. And the response was never really helpful. Not because they weren't caring or they weren't loving or they didn't want to help. It's just, it was an unachievable goal. What was I expecting in respect to them understanding? And what I learned was, even though that may be comforting to get that kind of level of I guess, attention when it comes to what I was going through, it was highly unlikely to be sustained. And the lesson I learned, I feel, the biggest one was that the change doesn't really come externally. It may be motivated, but I had to decide what does a healthier, what happier existence means to me. And that took several years to figure out, several times of feeling like, I guess, a little bit distant, a little shame, a little guilt, all mixed in. Not all of it was bad, but eventually there comes to a point where just existing wasn't enough. And I think one of the biggest steps, at least I could say personally, was not being satisfied with the maintaining of myself, not being satisfied with just existing. And I eventually, it was a trial and error basis, and later on maybe take some bold steps, maybe not explain everything, and maybe at times not share everything. I was private, understandably, because of the context. I had to make decisions because I started to gain value of what may be around the corner. And eventually, here I am, married almost 4 years. And for me, it just reminds me of it's the little things. It was understand. I can never really do what I'm doing without this discovery of the lessons I've learned, and some of them I've shared right now. It would be stunted if I was still perplexed to have everyone, or kind of in my mind, even though it's just an emotion, even though it may not be accurate, if I felt the urgency to have everyone to understand what I'm going through, if that was still a strong component of my motivation, I would guess that I wouldn't be as far as I am today. I would guess that some of the things would be still stagnant, and maintaining would feel more appealing than moving or stepping forward. So um, it's a scary notion, and it's not for the faint of heart. And obviously, it's not to be done recklessly. Obviously, these are just my interpretations from my own experience and what I've seen that may be helpful. And obviously, those who came before me and shared their insight are the same. But if you're asking these questions, of how do I take the first step, it may be an indication that there may be some um, degree, there might be some motivation that you want some sort of change. And um, I would encourage you to kind of understand, to explore those contexts, be curious of what that looks like. Um, at the same time, if it does get overwhelming, if you get discouraged, pause. But if it gets to the point where you feel you're unable to do more and you want to give up, whatever capacity it is, whether it is something just giving up on job, or giving up on a relationship, or even more seriously, giving up on your own life, I do encourage you to find help. Ask someone, tell someone, share someone what you're going through. Talk to someone that you really care about. They won't understand, but if you're able to speak out about what you're going through, you may be able to be pointed to someone who can help you. Um, but the idea is not to stay silent if these things are struggles. Usually staying silent usually doesn't help. In that regards, moving forward in the idea of some of the things we've talked about this month with other guests. Chinese proverb: a bird does not sing because it has an answer; it sings because it has a song. I think when I think of songs, and I remember hearing someone, I guess, share, the song, maybe we want to be heard, but also maybe we want to be sung together. There's also the idea that I may be singing the melody at one point and someone else will come in and sing some sort of harmony, and vice versa. Music can be a beautiful conduit of sharing experiences and emotions, and it can be very cathartic for those who find it being helpful to them to express what they're going through. So I do love this quote because I do feel, in essence, in a very poetic way, that we all have a song to sing, and it can be something that may provide some meaning to what the first step may be. Final thoughts: I just feel that when it comes to these things, be kinder to yourself. This does take time, but ask yourself this question: what is dictating the time? What is this urgency coming from? A lot of these problems are longer, have been there for some time, and may need some time to flush out. And sometimes, if we're able to slow down and kind of see things for what they are, the urgency may be just a fear or a thought of what someone else may think. And if that may be a protrusive thought, I would encourage you to kind of, again, be kind to yourself. These problems take the time it takes, and if it does really continue to be pervasively negative and you do find yourself thinking about giving up, I do encourage you to find that help, that professional help in the States, like I said, is 98 is our suicide crisis lifeline. But I encourage you, wherever you are, to find what may be helpful. Again, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for all guests, obviously, we had this month and months prior, and also the listeners. Thank you so much for continuing to listen and to share and to, at the same time, I feel this is a wonderful platform that, it has religious connotations with that word revive, but when I think about it, I think about of a medical mission, but really just talking about the social component of our mental and our overall health, and having discussions that sometimes are a little bit harder to have. And I do appreciate each guest that has been on here throughout the years, and also listeners like yourself. I want you to remember to stay updated with all things Revive Ministries through ReviveMinistriesFL.com is our website. This is goodbye from Revive Ministries Podcast, leaving with this last words of wisdom. It's from Pakistani proverb: pride is concerned with who is right, humility is concerned with what is right.